This Tuesday, patch 9.2.5 comes out with one of probably the biggest features ever added to World of Warcraft, that being cross-faction grouping for raiding and Mythic Plus and pretty much all content in the game. When that happens, a lot's going to change about the game, but some things that you might not have considered are also going to change. For what little that aggregates this way, there will never be a faction demarcation in terms of progression again, meaning if you look at your Raider IO stats, you're now only going to be aggregated by region, no longer by region and faction. So all of Alliance players and Horde players on the US realms are just all in one pool. That's going to heavily impact the 0.1% title thing that they added a few patches back. And presumably this is going to change how the Hall of Fame works going forward as well, but there's nothing confirmed on that quite yet. The reason I'm making this video though is the way we've played WoW and looked at WoW is now over. And it's been a hot topic on this channel for a long time. I'm talking for multiple years now, comparing Horde players and Alliance players from two different directions. So I thought it would be a good idea to officially recap everything I've thought about for the last few years and hopefully help you guys get a little bit of what's going to happen here in the future. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be switching factions just based on their interests now, so most of this is going to be blurred, but I think it'll be fun to kind of reflect on what the game used to look like, perhaps in a day when it was a healthier balance as well, but what it ultimately ended up becoming and why that became a problem for Blizzard. So if you don't know my story, I will quickly tell you that I started as an Alliance but quickly changed to Horde in the Burning Crusade and had played Horde from the Burning Crusade all the way through Shadowlands. I only played there because my friends played there originally, and I believe they only played there because of like PvP or something in the beginning, but it became a pretty hot topic in raids like Throne of Thunder and Tomb of Sargeras that Horde just had really powerful ratios for those raids world first races, and that continued to draw more competitive minded players to the Horde faction. Eventually it got to a point where it seemed like Alliance really didn't have any competitive players, and throughout BFA I echoed this sentiment quite a lot. In fact, if you watched the stream back then, you would know that I was leveling a Death Knight on Alliance, which I am now ultimately playing as my main, purely for the reason to see what harder keys would look like with non-competitive players. Then about a year and a half after doing so, a big problem started to develop for me on Horde. A lot of it's just association with other issues that were going on for me with the game and my life in general at the time, but I was getting really frustrated with something that was happening a lot and then I had heard was not happening at all on Alliance. In Horde Mythic Plus keys, it seemed like there was a lot of really overly aggressive players with mentalities that just didn't match their actual skill level. I feel like you see this in every element of any type of competitive atmosphere, not just including World of Warcraft, but even real life sports and stuff like that, where people are so aggressively concerned with the outcome that they kind of forget where they're actually at as a player or as a person. The problem that I had with Horde was a lot of those players were exhibiting that behavior and then taking it out on others. For the better part of all of Shadowlands, when I was on Horde, we had a lot of disbands, and I was blaming a lot of that on this mentality in general here, where people would just expect everything to go perfect, and if it didn't go perfect, they were just going to give up and go try again with a different group. But I've posted multiple videos now between Horde videos and Alliance videos showing that you can have a lot of mistakes in keys and still upgrade them and still succeed. One video specifically, we had 30 deaths in a necrotic wake, and a halls we had 3 full wipes and still upgraded both keys at a progression level at the time. So that was really frustrating to me because it felt like I was only pugging keys and a good chunk of the keys were comprised of players who were just going to bail on the first sign of imperfection, and not only were those people wasting my time, but they were also hindering me from having success. It came to a head one day when I was already really frustrated with a lot of different things between the game, real life, and what was going on stream pugging, where we were doing necrotic wake. I believe it was like 21 or 22, famously one of the easiest keys ever to exist in all 3 expansions of Mythic Plus, and we were fighting one of the mini bosses from season 2 at the time, Arkalath the Incinerator, and his fire ability killed a healer, I believe 2 times. It might have even been 3 times. I think he onked and died again. It was the Resto Shaman. This player died 3 times to one mob. Not a great predictor of success, but it's the easiest key in the game. Almost always you're going to be in contention for a double upgrade in this key, and the Demon Hunter just leaves the key after 5 minutes of play. Well, I was really frustrated about that. That clip's still on the channel. You can watch it if you want. And I was very frustrated at that player specifically. So I started messaging him, and he started trying to defend his action. Like, he thought it was a viable reason to disband a key, that level of success was expected of, and it just became the seminal moment for me wanting to switch off Horde. But it came to a head, especially when I published the clip, and then there was a lot of people commenting that, yeah, that guy was right, he should leave that key. And it made me realize that a lot of people who are pretending to be serious WoW players aren't actually serious about outcomes. They're just serious about their own level. They believe that the only thing that actually matters is their ability to do something well, and the overall group does not matter to them whatsoever. And I get it, you know, when you're pugging, it's easy to be that disassociative with other players, but for me, I've always been a team-oriented person. I feel like I need to do whatever I can to put the team on my back. A lot of times it feels like that's really important as a Blood DK especially, and it's very satisfactory to me. It feels like when I make a big play as a Blood DK that almost nobody else is able to make in the group, it feels very rewarding, and not just for me, but because I was able to help the 4 other people in the group. Certainly there's been times when I think, man, this guy does not deserve the key he's in. That happens all the time, even now, but never once would I ever consider disbanding a very easy key over something that petty, especially not as a Demon Hunter DPS. Like, let's be serious about that. So that mentality, seeing that in the comment section on top of the actual in-game comments, kind of broke a pane of glass that I didn't realize was between me and competitive play, and it made me a lot less interested in that mentality in general. So then I switched to Alliance. A few reasons, also to help a group of people that I had known for a while were struggling doing casual raiding, but that was ultimately the main reason I wanted to do it, was because I wanted to see what the fruit on the other tree was like. And we played Alliance since January now. We've been here for probably closer to 5 months, if not closer to 6 months at this point. I think we started officially in December, but we've been playing seriously since January, and I have to say it's been a very interesting experience. There's 3 things that I can say for sure are different about Alliance compared to Horde. Number 1, unfortunately, is that everybody just seems way more mature. I think a lot of the people who get baited into thinking that this game is all about rushing to the highest progression you can possibly get, unfortunately, are probably the younger generation of people playing video games right now. Especially people like myself and people who are even older than me who have been playing the game for a really long time know that there should be some degree of failure expected in any difficult content. For years, raiding was the only real content that could challenge you, and obviously you would wipe hundreds of times before you would kill any boss. So I think that mentality just doesn't get echoed into people who only do Mythic Plus nowadays, and they expect there to be no deaths or no failures and everything just be smooth. And if it's not, it's just abject failure and we're going to leave and not even try. But for somebody who raided for as long as I did, there's been many times where we'd kill a boss with 1 person alive, or even famously my good friend Siler onking after the boss actually should have reset. Everybody dead, he onks and finishes the boss. That happened multiple times throughout our years raiding together, and that mentality is always something that I bring to keys as well. Like, it's not over until it's over, right? And even though there's some predictors for failure that you could notice early on, let's see what happens. You never know. So that mentality is alive and well on the Alliance for sure. But I think it's actually more because of the next 2 things that I'm going to bring up than those people are actually optimistically hoping that we'll succeed. But I do think just kind of a general, more mature player base is playing Alliance seriously. Now, for years, I used to say the opposite, and I just want to take a moment to explain why I would say the opposite. Because from what I can tell, it was a lot of younger people playing Alliance, but those people might still exist and they're doing like RP or whatever it is they might be interested in, but they're not actually the ones doing like 20 plus Mythic Plus keystones. Like, those people are doing non-competitive content. I've met a lot of those people, especially through the forums, and that's fine. Have fun playing the game that way. But the people who are actually playing Alliance seriously are tending to be a far more mature base in my experience. But the other 2 things that I want to bring up are also really unique as well. The overall population on Alliance in pugging of Mythic Plus keystones is so vastly different from what I've described from Horde. It's actually shocking in the way that they almost never overreact to a single mistake. Don't think I've seen it a single time. I'm sure there's been 1 or 2, but there has never really been any of those moments where a couple deaths start an argument that disband the key. And that was the hallmark of Horde. For years, even through Legion, I saw that all the time. A couple bad deaths, and then you start getting like question marks being typed or really silly accusations, and that would cause two sides to start fighting with each other. And once that happens, that's basically the end of the key. As a tank, as long as I'm not involved, I can keep pulling, but I can't really force them to play their characters anymore. And usually once somebody starts getting tilted like that, that's it for that. I don't think I've really noticed that at all happen on Alliance, and that alone has increased my success rate substantially. There are still players who get a little uppity, but it seems like the vast majority of people, even like in the higher keystone levels, are completely calm about any type of mistake and completely aware that they can still succeed despite those mistakes. So a lot of people just flat out ignore the person making that remark. Occasionally people are like, we're going to disband, right? Basically make comments like that. And the other four people are just like, nope, we're going to keep going. You know what I mean? It's like, never would you see that on Horde. But I do think a lot of that is actually honestly just obliviousness, because a big problem I've also seen on Alliance is just a complete lack of skill. There's a lot of people who just have no idea what they're doing, and they're still succeeding, which tells you everything you need to know about where World of Warcraft's at nowadays, but it can be very frustrating in my eyes. It's a double-edged sword though, because that level of obliviousness helps us succeed at times, because like there'll be like a bad death, like a death that's really bad that should not be happening in a high key, and these people just have actually no idea why they died. So they're just like, oh well, you know, they're like, oh well, I died, you know, like they don't have a reason to be mad, and they don't have anything to take their aggression out on, because they're so unaware of what happened that they think it's the game just bugged out, maybe is what their most logical conclusion might end up being. And we have seen that a lot. I have a couple of clips now where that kind of thing has happened on Alliance here, and it's kind of a bit charming at times, kind of funny, but it actually makes keys succeed more, believe it or not, because then they don't tilt, they don't get upset, they don't start arguments, people don't start fights, and it just has a higher prediction for success when you're just plugging in no voice communication where people can't actually talk. The number one thing about that though, I have to say, is really kind of cool. Actually, it just happened on stream yesterday. Happens all the time. On Horde, people used to whisper you and just immediately put you on ignore and start like these super petty arguments about nothing, and just take the most absolutely childish route to try to feel like they're winning those arguments. I know exactly what it feels like emotionally. I've been in these arguments since I can remember. Like I remember the first time it ever happened to me was in Wrath of the Lich King. This other holy pally typed lol at your spec, and then when I tried to ask for clarification, I had been already placed on ignore, and that kind of thing had been following me since that day. I'll never forget that moment, and I never forget that feeling. It feels like a great mix of anxiety and rage all boiled into one thing, because I'm really upset that this person is not only challenging me, and then I'm very angry that this person is not actually allowing a conversation to happen because of some stupid convention that Blizzard has put in place where you're actually still able to whisper somebody even though you have them on ignore. That should not be allowed. This used to happen all the time in keys though, where some kind of argument would happen, somebody would leave, and then they would whisper you like, lol, you suck, something like that, and then you'd try to reply to them, and it was either going to turn into some super petty argument, and myself included obviously in that, or it was just going to be an immediate ignore, and there would be no way to actually communicate after that, which to me, that's like as immature as any type of behavior could ever get. But on Alliance, it is so different. It's actually insane. I had at least 3 conversations I can remember, one just the other day on stream, where it could have easily turned into that same thing, and I would expect it to, because I'm used to that. World of Warcraft in general has always kind of carried that with it, where people are just like over the top aggressive for no real reason, and any type of disagreement turns into this argument instead. And my god, am I shocked that it doesn't have, like, it's really weird. We're just talking about this with this guy who was like trying to convince me why Beast Mastery Hunter was worth bringing to a key instead of the other 2 specs. And honestly, you know, I said some things that maybe were forward to the guy, and I could easily see him getting really mad at me and doing that same thing. But we carried on a conversation for probably like 15 minutes. No insults were used. You know, I thought I was being pretty rational as well. And he actually messaged me again later. Like, that's how people on our alliance are, man. They just don't really care. They just seem to be way more chill and way calmer. And I am absolutely going to miss that. That's the number one thing I'm going to miss. Presumably, you know, that will still generally exist, but we're going to have a lot of bleed over between the 2 factions now. So it was a good environment to come. I was having a really difficult time with some things going on with the game and also in real life. And I just really needed that. I just needed that place where people would not constantly be complaining about my routes or trying to tell me how to play my character. It's just really nice to just chill out and just play the way I want and just focus on the success that I can get from that output. But the third thing, and the thing thing that ultimately makes me very excited for patch 9.25 that's coming and is vastly different from Horde. There is just a lot less people doing Mythic Plus. But it's weird because I'm not really sure what's actually happening here. If you look at Raider.io, you see it's basically only about 2-to-1 Horde to Alliance in terms of keystones. Like there's still a lot of people succeeding on Alliance, a lot of people way more successful than even I am. But I think there must be one of two explanations for this. One, this is probably the real answer, is there's a lot less people pugging. I don't know what the difference is, but pugging seems like very vibrant on Horde. It seemed like a lot of people were pugging. Even I know people who were pugging like really high keys, like 27s and stuff back in BFA. So it's like very open. A pugging atmosphere is very open there, you know? On Alliance, pugging still occurs, of course, but my God, is there just a fraction of the amount of keys. So even though it's 2-to-1, there's basically like, say like there'll be like 20 keys listed on Horde. There's only like 1 or 2 listed on Alliance. It's more like 10-to-1 for keys. So my original hypothesis was that people were just really scared to list their key for some reason. Like it does seem like there's a fair amount of applicants. It's not as good as I would hope it would be. It's decent, but there's just no keys at all at times. Like if I'm trying to find 23s, it's really, really hard to find that as Alliance right now. And honestly, man, this season is a very approachable season. Blood DK is the strongest it's been in quite a while. I should definitely be on the range of 24, 25 right now, but those keys just don't exist for me on Alliance. And because the few that do exist are being listed by people who aren't pugging and they've been progressing steadily with their group, unlike me, I look like I'm not qualified for them, you know, like 150 to 200 points lower than those people, even though I'm 100% sure my character can survive it. And I feel like everything is coming up in success rate for Blood DK at this point and me playing it. I just can't get in because there's no smooth progression. That's always been the thing that I've felt like I've done the best with pugging, is I'm very patient. I'll just pug all 23s, all 24s, all 25s and look like I'm more qualified than I am because I'm doing every single key, where a lot of people are just kind of rapidly climbing and they're not taking the time to go back and fix like a key that is still in their list from a lower level. So they just are going to end up having less score than me, who's just doing it in a patient, even way. So presumably come Tuesday and the future months of Shadowlands, that's going to be solved. We're going to be able to finally play with Horde and use their keys. So I'll still, you know, obviously hope to find the keys that I've been finding, but then if need be, we can find even more. But I do also want to say that I'm not extremely excited about playing with those players again from Horde. And if it was up to me, I would still continue to play with only Alliance characters. And at first I thought that this was going to be a moment that really made me upset that they were breaking down this barrier. Talked about why I'm not necessarily that upset, but still it is a bit in my mind that a lot of those players and that characteristic from that type of player from Horde is now going to be all over keys again, and it's going to make me want to do them a lot less again. But I do think that there is a little bit of a silver lining here and something I hope to actually see manifest. A lot of those players, I think, were the reason that I felt that this faction as Alliance was mostly bereft of any actual skilled players and mostly habited by kids. I felt like I heard that a lot too from Horde players, and it wasn't necessarily people I trusted to tell me the accurate truth. I think the connection between that mentality and then the same mentality we talked about where you would overreact to mistakes and get really aggressive and end up disbanding keys for no reason, those two things are inexorably linked. So I actually hope that this will end up being a really good situation where those players simply will just not be interested in playing with Alliance. They'll have this preconceived bias that there's no reason to play with Alliance, so they'll just continue in their own little circle and they can just do whatever they want. But us pugging from the Alliance side, we won't really have to see those types of players. Inevitably, though, I'm sure that will end up being wrong, and I'll still find many of players that are, now that the border is going to be opened again, it's going to be hard to be confident. Like, you know, you kind of carve yourself this mental niche here where you're thinking like, okay, everybody I'm playing with is calm, cool, and collected, and then there's going to be 1 or 2 outliers. Well, now that that border is broken, it's just going to be back to thinking like everybody's going to snap, and, you know, the average is going to be the disband instead of the completion, and we're not really going to gut out a lot of keys, and that's not necessarily interesting to me. I do hope that season 4 will help with that as well, and the concepts going forward, even though I'm not exactly excited about this whole thing and how they're going to be rewashing dungeons and then getting rid of them every season. I do think that that will make it easier to avoid this kind of thing, because I feel like that whole situation where people just kind of leave after one mistake, that only really happens when they feel like they've kind of like mastered the dungeons. That's not really going to happen at the beginning of a season, because like they're not necessarily going to know what happened or how to solve it either. And so everybody will kind of be starting from the same point. And even those players with that mentality, they'll be kind of forced to be humbled by the situation, by the fact that they don't necessarily know everything about the dungeon themselves. So whatever, who knows how this is going to work out. I just wanted to give my thoughts. 9.2.5 coming. That does not mean that season 4 is starting, by the way. We've talked a lot about this. Season 4 looks like it's still a couple months away, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see what this is going to change for the landscape. I'd like to see how this ends up working, and hopefully it'll be good for the game. I mean, theoretically, it should basically be doubling the player base. Obviously, Horde had a larger chunk of the player base anyway, though, so for Alliance, it's certainly going to help. Should be a lot easier to find keys, and hopefully it'll be easier to play with our friends again. I am looking forward to potentially reuniting with people that I haven't played with for the better part of the last 6 months. So let me know what you guys think about this, especially if you're Alliance, but also if you're a Horde player, you've been playing on Horde the whole time. Let me know what you think about all this. If you think any of this is inaccurate, I'd love to have a conversation about it. So thank you for watching. We're going to see you guys in the next video.